The battlefield was chaos. Bullets tore through the air, explosions shook the ground beneath my boots, and the smell of smoke and blood clung to my uniform. My squad was pinned down, trapped in an ambush we hadn't seen coming. I kept my rifle steady, my hands moving automatically, clearing my sector, scanning for movement. The radio crackled with static as our commanding officer barked out orders, but I barely heard him. All I could focus on was surviving the next few seconds. That was all that mattered. I had been in combat before, many times. I had trained for this, lived for this. I had told myself I was prepared for anything, that I understood what it meant to be a soldier. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened next. A sharp, searing pain shot through my chest. The impact knocked me backward, my body slamming against the dirt as my weapon fell from my hands. My ears rang, my vision blurred, and a cold numbness spread through me. I gasped for air, but nothing came. I had always thought that dying in battle would be some glorious thing, a warrior's end, the kind of death soldiers talked about like it was an honor. But lying there, feeling my pulse slow, my limbs grow heavy, all I felt was an overwhelming sense of finality. This was it. There was no dramatic music, no heroic last words, just silence. I had spent years believing war was all there was, that my only purpose was to fight, to survive, to win. But now, I wasn't surviving anymore. I was dying, and as the darkness took me, a thought crossed my mind. What happens next? I opened my eyes, expecting to wake up on the battlefield, maybe in a medevac helicopter or on an operating table. But I wasn't there. I wasn't anywhere I recognized. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. Everything around me was vast, empty yet endless, silent yet deafening. It was like standing in a space that stretched forever, without walls, without ground, without sky. Just a void. I tried to move, but my legs wouldn't respond. My arms felt weightless at my sides, but at the same time I felt heavier than I had ever been before. A suffocating stillness pressed in around me, making every breath feel impossible. Then I realized I wasn't alone. I couldn't see them, but I could feel them, watching. Dozens, maybe hundreds of eyes on me, surrounding me in every direction. My instincts screamed at me to find cover, to draw my weapon, to fight back. But I had no weapon, no body, no way to fight. I opened my mouth to speak, to demand to know what was happening, but my voice wouldn't come. Just as panic started creeping into my chest, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A whisper. No, many whispers. Soft at first, barely audible, but growing louder with each passing second. They didn't come from one place. They came from everywhere. And they weren't just murmuring random words. They were repeating something I had heard before. My own words. You were a soldier. You were a warrior. You fought. You killed. Their voices weren't angry. They weren't mocking. They were just stating facts. And as they spoke, images flashed before my eyes. War, cities in ruins, people screaming. The faces of men I had killed, the faces of men I had lost. I had always told myself it was necessary, that I had only done what had to be done, that I had followed orders, upheld my duty, done my part. But now, standing in this empty abyss, I felt something I had never allowed myself to feel before. Guilt. I had spent my life believing in war, living for it, killing for it. But now in this place, I saw it differently. And then a voice spoke, one that wasn't part of the whispers. It was deeper, stronger, unshakable. You fought for your country, but did you fight for the truth? The words hit me like a shockwave. I had fought for my unit, for my brothers in arms, for my mission. But the truth? Before I could even think of an answer, something changed. The shadows around me shifted. The weight on my chest grew heavier. The whispering voices grew louder, more urgent, and then I started sinking. The void beneath me opened up, pulling me downward. My legs, if I even had them, felt like they were being yanked into something darker, deeper, endless. I struggled, but I couldn't stop it. I wasn't going up, I was going down. I had spent my life believing that heaven and hell were just ideas, concepts people clung to for comfort. But now I knew the truth. They were real, and I wasn't ready. I screamed, thrashing, trying to fight my way out, but there was nothing to hold on to. I was a soldier. I had trained my whole life to fight. But now, for the first time ever, I couldn't win. I was losing. And then, light. A blinding, overwhelming light. It cut through the darkness like a blade, forcing the shadows back, stopping my descent in an instant. The weight on my chest vanished, and I gasped, feeling air fill my lungs again. And then, through the radiance, I saw him. Jesus. I had spent my life ignoring him. I had dismissed religion as something weak, something soft, something for men who didn't understand war. But now, standing before him, I realized I had never known true strength before this moment. Because he was strength itself. I had faced death before. I had stood in battlefields, faced enemies, looked straight into the eyes of men who wanted to kill me. But I had never felt fear like this. Not because he was terrifying, but because he was holy. And I knew, in that moment, that I wasn't. His gaze met mine, and I felt everything I had ever done, every bullet fired, every life taken, every moment of pride and arrogance laid bare before him. I had nothing to hide behind, nothing to justify myself with. I was unworthy, and yet he had come for me, not to condemn me, but to save me. I fell to my knees, my entire body shaking. I didn't deserve mercy. I didn't deserve to stand in his presence, but he was offering it anyway. And in that moment, I understood. Everything I had lived for, the war, the fight, the purpose I thought I had, it had all been a distraction. This was the truth, and I had almost missed it. Kneeling before him, I felt my entire existence unravel. Every battle I had fought, every order I had followed, every moment I had convinced myself I was doing the right thing. It all lay bare before me. I wasn't standing before a general. I wasn't in front of a judge. I was in the presence of the King of Kings, the one true authority. The weight of that realization crushed me more than any battlefield ever had. I had spent my life defining myself by strength. I was the soldier, the warrior, the one who survived. I had believed that life was war, that the only thing that mattered was winning. But now, in this place, I saw it differently. I had fought in the wrong war. I had served a kingdom that was destined to fall. Memories filled my mind, faces of men I had killed, enemies I had destroyed. Some had died fighting, others hadn't even seen it coming. I'd always told myself it was necessary, that I had only done what was required of me. But here, in the presence of the one who created all things, I could see the truth. It had never been my right to take those lives. The whispers in the void returned, but this time, they weren't just repeating my words. They were speaking something deeper. You followed orders, but who were you really serving? You believed in power, but where did your strength come from? You thought you were the master of your fate. You never were. I wanted to argue, to push back, to say that I had done what I had to do, but in front of Jesus I couldn't lie. I had always believed I was fighting for something greater. I had convinced myself that war was necessary, that someone had to take up arms, that someone had to be strong enough to make the hard choices. But now, standing in this place, I realized I had been deceived. And then, the most terrifying realization of all hit me. I had been serving the wrong master. All my life, I had thought I was in control, that I was the one making choices, the one shaping my destiny. But looking back now, I saw the truth. I had been manipulated, used, turned into a tool for something I had never even recognized. War had consumed me. Violence had defined me, and the enemy of my soul had whispered lies into my heart for years, convincing me that as long as I was strong, I was right. I wasn't right. I was lost. The darkness that had once pulled at me suddenly surged forward, pressing in on all sides. I gasped, feeling something invisible wrap around my chest, though clawing at my soul. The abyss had not forgotten me. It had been waiting. I looked back at Jesus, panic rising in my throat. But he didn't move. His expression didn't change. He didn't need to say a word. I already knew. I had a choice. I had been saved from the abyss, but I could still choose to go back. I could still cling to my pride, to my anger, to my justifications. I could still reject him. I had spent my life following orders without question. Now, for the first time, I had to make my own choice. Tears burned in my eyes. The weight of my sins, my arrogance, my blindness. It was all too much. I had spent my life believing in war, in violence, in power. But now, kneeling before the King of Kings, I realized that real strength wasn't found in battle. It was found in surrender. And so, with a voice barely above a whisper, I spoke the hardest words I had ever said. I was wrong. The moment those words left my lips, something inside me shattered. The darkness around me recoiled, shrieking as if in pain. The weight on my chest lifted. The unseen hands clawing at me vanished. I felt a warmth rush through me, unlike anything I had ever known. Jesus reached out his hand. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed onto it with everything I had, clinging to him like my life depended on it. Because for the first time in my existence, I realized that it did. The light surrounding him intensified, engulfing me completely. The whispers were gone. The abyss was gone. The pain, the fear, the anger, gone. All that remained was peace. And then in an instant, everything faded. I was pulled back. I gasped, my lungs burning as air rushed into them. My eyes flew open, and I found myself staring up at a blinding white ceiling. A beeping sound filled my ears. My body felt like it had been crushed under a mountain. I tried to move, but pain shot through me. Someone was shouting. I could hear voices, urgent, panicked. "He's back." I turned my head slightly, wincing. I wasn't in battle anymore. I was in a hospital. Machines surrounded me, tubes running from my arms. My chest ached, bandaged tightly. I was alive. But I wasn't the same. I saw movement to my side. My wife was there, tears streaming down her face. She pressed a hand to her mouth, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She had been praying. I could feel it. She had been praying for me to come back, and I had. but not as the man I was before. I tried to speak, but my throat was raw, my voice barely above a whisper, but I had to say it. She had to know. I saw him. She let out a sob, collapsing onto the side of my bed. My hand found hers, weak but steady. Everything I had believed, everything I had built my life around, was gone. I'd been given a second chance, a chance I didn't deserve, a chance to change, a chance to fight for the right side. Because I knew now. War didn't make men strong. God did. The hospital room felt too bright, too sterile, too small. My body ached in ways I couldn't even explain. But it wasn't the physical pain that weighed on me. It was something deeper, something I had never carried before. Conviction, the weight of what I had seen, what I now knew to be true. I had faced death before. I had seen my brothers in arms fall. I had watched as bullets ripped through bodies, as explosions turned men to nothing but smoke and memory. I had learned how to shut off my emotions, to push forward, to focus on survival. But this time was different. I had survived, but not because of skill, training, or luck. I had survived because Jesus saved me. My mind kept replaying it over and over. The moment I had felt myself being pulled into the abyss, the realization that I had been on the wrong path all along. The moment I had seen him, felt his presence, his power, his love. I had spent my whole life believing I was strong, that I didn't need anyone or anything except my own instincts, my own abilities. That war was my purpose, my identity, my reason for existing. But now, everything I had built my life on felt like a lie. The door creaked open, and my wife stepped inside. The moment our eyes met, she let out a breath, as if she had been holding it in for hours, maybe days. She rushed to my side, gripping my hand tightly, like she was afraid I would disappear again. "I thought I lost you," she whispered. Her voice cracked, her eyes red with tears. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I had so much I wanted to tell her, but I didn't even know where to begin. How could I explain something like this? How could I tell her that everything I had ever believed was wrong? That I had seen the truth with my own eyes? That I had stood at the edge of hell and almost didn't make it back? Instead, I just whispered, "I saw him." Her breath hitched, tears welled in her eyes again, but this time, they weren't just from relief. They were from understanding. She had always believed. She had always prayed for me, even when I mocked her faith, even when I dismissed God as something weak. And now, for the first time, I understood why. She pressed her forehead to my hand, sobbing softly. I didn't have to say anything else. She already knew. But outside of this hospital room, there were still people who didn't. A week later, I was released. My body was healing, but my soul still felt like it was learning how to breathe again. I had spent my life as a soldier, trained to move on from pain, to keep fighting, to follow the mission. But for the first time, I didn't know what my mission was anymore. I wasn't the same man who had walked onto that battlefield. I wasn't the same man my fellow soldiers knew. I wasn't even the same man my own family knew. And I had no idea how to explain it. I avoided phone calls from my squad. I ignored messages from my brothers in arms. I couldn't face them yet. How could I? They knew me as a warrior, as someone who didn't flinch at violence, as someone who didn't believe in religious nonsense. How could I tell them that the same man they used to fight beside, the same man who had once mocked men of faith, had now met Jesus Christ face to face? I had survived countless missions, faced impossible odds, stood in the middle of gunfire without fear. But now, the idea of telling my fellow soldiers about what had happened to me, that was the hardest battle yet. I knew I couldn't hide forever. A few days after I got home, one of my squad mates, Ramirez, called. I hesitated before answering, my pulse quickening, but I couldn't avoid it anymore. "Man," he said, his voice filled with relief, "you scared the hell out of us." I forced a chuckle, rubbing a hand over my face. "Yeah," I muttered. "Scared the hell out of myself, too." He exhaled. "We thought you were gone. Doc said you flatlined, man. You shouldn't even be alive." I swallowed, gripping the phone tighter. "I know." There was a pause. Then hesitantly, he asked, "Did you see anything?" My breath caught. I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. The darkness, the whispers, the feeling of being pulled down. The moment I saw Jesus standing in the light, reaching for me. I could lie. I could brush it off. Say I didn't remember. Say it was nothing. That's what I would have done before. That's what they would have expected me to do. But I wasn't that man anymore. So I told the truth. I saw hell, I whispered, and I saw Jesus pull me out of it. Silence. Not the awkward kind. Not the kind where someone is trying to think of something clever to say. The kind where someone has just heard something that shakes them to their core. "You're serious. Dead serious." I didn't know what he was thinking. I didn't know if he would laugh, if he would call me crazy, if he would write me off as some brain-damaged war vet who had lost his mind. But then, after a long pause, he spoke again. "Tell me more." That was the first time I shared my story. But it wouldn't be the last. Word spread. Some laughed. Some ignored me. Some told me I was crazy. But others listened. Men who had seen death. Men who had killed. Men who had convinced themselves they didn't need God, just like I had. And one by one, they started asking the same question. What if you're right? What if? I knew the answer. I had seen the truth with my own eyes. I had been on the wrong path. And now, for the first time in my life, I knew what my real mission was. Not to fight for my country, not to fight for a flag, not to fight for survival, but to fight for souls. Because war wasn't the real battlefield. This was. I spent my entire career following orders, preparing for battle, ready to lay down my life at a moment's notice. But this was different. This was a war I had never trained for, a battlefield I had never expected to step onto. And the enemy? He was one I had unknowingly served for years. After my conversation with Ramirez, I knew there was no turning back. I had a choice to make. I could pretend none of this happened. I could bury it deep, call it a hallucination, and go back to my old life. But I knew that wasn't the truth. And the truth was the only thing that mattered now. I had spent my life convinced that I was in control, that I was the one shaping my destiny, that I didn't need God. I had told myself I was strong, but in the end my strength had meant nothing when I stood at the edge of eternity. I had been powerless, completely at the mercy of something far greater than me. And now I understood. True power had never been mine. It had always belonged to him. Jesus had saved me, not because I deserved it, not because I had done anything right, but because of grace, because he had never stopped calling me, even when I refused to listen, because he had been fighting for me all along, even when I thought I was fighting for myself. Now, it was my turn to fight for him. A few weeks after I was discharged, I sat in my truck outside the base, staring at the chain-link fence that separated my old life from whatever was ahead. I had spent years behind those gates. It had been my home, my identity, my purpose, and now, for the first time, I didn't belong there anymore. I had orders once, clear, direct commands that told me what to do, where to go, who to fight. But this time, there were no written instructions, no commanding officer giving me a mission briefing, just a quiet voice in my heart, the same one that had spoken to me in that moment of surrender, telling me the battle wasn't over. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the truck. I wasn't walking back into a war zone. I was walking into a different kind of battlefield. At first, I didn't know where to start. I wasn't a preacher. I wasn't a pastor. I wasn't some theologian who had spent years studying scripture. All I had was my story, and for a long time, I thought that wouldn't be enough. But God had other plans. It started with small conversations, one-on-one talks with men who had fought beside me, men who carried the same burdens I had, men who had seen too much and felt too little. They didn't always believe me at first. Some thought I was crazy, some laughed it off, but others listened, and that was enough. Then came the invitations. A veteran group asked me to speak, then a church, then a recovery program for soldiers dealing with PTSD. Before I knew it, I was standing in front of rooms full of men and women who had seen war and didn't know how to make sense of it. And for the first time in my life, I had something to give them that wasn't just another strategy for survival. I had the truth. I told them everything, the abyss, the whispers, the way I had felt my sins weigh me down, dragging me towards something I never thought was real. And then I told them about the light, the moment Jesus had reached out his hand, the way he had saved me from a fate I had chosen for myself. I expected skepticism. I expected doubt. But what I saw in their eyes wasn't just disbelief. It was fear. Because deep down, they knew. They had felt the same darkness, and they weren't ready for what was waiting on the other side. One night, long after I had left the military behind, I got a call. It was Ramirez. I hadn't heard from him in years, but his voice was different now. "Hey, man," he said, quiet. "I just wanted to tell you. I believe you now." I felt my chest tighten. What happened? There was silence on the other end, then a slow breath. "I almost died today." The words hit me like a punch. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. He had seen it. Maybe not the same way I had, maybe not the same vision, the same experience, but he had faced death, and he had realized he wasn't ready, just like I hadn't been. I swallowed hard. "You don't have to go through this alone." He let out a shaky laugh. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." There was another pause. "Tell me about Jesus." I blinked back tears. I had fought battles my whole life. But this was the real war. Not for land, not for victory, for souls. I didn't need a rifle for this fight. I didn't need armor, or tactics, or brute strength. I needed faith. The world had taught me that war made men strong, that battle made them powerful, that blood and sacrifice and survival were what mattered. But I had seen what was waiting at the end of it. And now, I knew the truth. The greatest battle wasn't fought with weapons. It was fought in the soul, and the only one who could win it was Jesus.